So I just did this whole video and screwed the whole thing up and now have to do the whole thing all over again. So welcome, happy Monday. And tonight's a little different. I am not in front of the camera. I've decided to stay behind the camera tonight, but I'm covering something that is very important I haven't really seen much in the videos of Making a Murderer, and that is the planted evidence. Obviously, we all know that there was planted evidence. But what I take you on tonight is a PowerPoint presentation, because we're still not good with video, but a PowerPoint presentation that I made that answers a lot of questions about how it possibly could have happened. Now, a lot of people, especially guilters, can't get past the blood in the RAV4, which I do understand that, okay, Stephen's blood was in it, but when you look at the entire totality of it, there's no possible way that he's guilty. And if you really are having a hard time fathoming this, watch this PowerPoint, because what I decided to do was take a break from actual Making a Murderer, and over the weekend, I would have done it sooner, but my OBS died. I couldn't figure it out. So thank you, Angelo, for fixing it today. And this way I made a PowerPoint of different planting of evidence in different DAs and police departments that have gotten in trouble for it. 2 out of 5 were in Wisconsin. One of them, the last presentation that I have, is from a case in 2016 in Kenosha, which is approximately 107 miles away from Manitowoc. Maybe Ken Kratz worked with them, I don't know, but it's pretty close to Making a Murderer. I hope you guys enjoy the presentation. Stick around at the end. I'm going to discuss a couple of things. And I really hope you guys learn something, because it does happen. Oh, and before I even start, let me just state that I don't believe that 100 people were involved in this. I never did. Even 2 years ago, before I even looked at this evidence, I never thought everybody was involved. What I have stated, and I will state again, is that I do believe that there is about 4 people who are actually involved in nailing Stephen and Brendan. What I also tend to believe, and this is where I totally disagree with Zellner, I do not believe Bobby put the blood in the RAV4. I absolutely do not. I don't know where she got that from. I know she's way smarter than I am, but I just don't see that. I don't think Bobby's that smart, and I certainly don't think he was that smart at 17 years old. What I do think, though, is that, and a lot of people ask me, well, what's my take on it? What's my opinion? Especially guilters. Like, how can, I come across to them like not sounding like a Avery fanatic, because I'm not. But it comes down to the totality of everything. And when you look at everything piece by piece, it may not seem so bad, or it may seem bad, but when you look at the totality of everything, it puts a whole different spin on it. And I think that's what's most important. So a lot of people ask me, I know I'm rambling a little, but a lot of people ask me, what is my impression? What do I think happened? And I am a firm believer, Kratz, Colburn, Link, and maybe somebody else actually set up Stephen and Brendan. And maybe in their own mind, they believed that Stephen and Brendan did it. But knowing something and being able to prove something are 2 completely different things. And I firmly believe that most of the people involved in the setup really believed that Stephen and Brendan did it. So now they just needed to prove it. Or I shouldn't say Brendan, I'll say Stephen, that they really believe Stephen did it. So they needed the evidence to prove it. And no different than Zellner knowing that they didn't do it, but now has to be able to prove it. So let me start with the PowerPoint. I'm going to read it just for those viewers that are deaf and need the closed caption. So I don't want to leave them out, and I know I have a bunch of them. So unfortunately, if you don't want to hear my voice, you can mute me, but I am going to read each paragraph. I try to keep them short. All right, so we're going to start with Nebraska. This is very interesting. In 2006, Nebraska Crime Lab Commander David Kafode purported to find a small trace of murder victims' blood underneath the driver's side dashboard of a suspected getaway car in a grisly farmhouse murder. The blood corroborated a false confession from a mentally challenged relative who was implicated himself and another cousin, even though no physical evidence at the extremely bloody crime scene had linked the two cousins to the shotgun slayings roughly 30 miles away. Later, DNA residue found on a drug pipe and an engraved ring dropped by the real killers excluded the Nebraska cousins. That sounds awfully familiar. Instead, the DNA implicated two Horicon, Wisconsin teenagers who were on a cross-country crime spree. Ultimately, the Wisconsin killers pleaded guilty and murder charges were dismissed against the Nebraska cousins. The FBI later determined that Kafade used a blood-soaked shirt collected from one of the murder victims to frame the Nebraska cousins, not realizing at the time that they were truly innocent. That's kind of coinciding with what I'm saying. The FBI also uncovered another high-profile Nebraska murder case from 2003 in which Kafade planted blood to frame someone who already confessed and later pleaded guilty to murdering a small child. In 2010, a Nebraska judge found Kafade guilty of tampering with evidence in a pair of unrelated murder cases. Kafade later served 2 full years in state prison, which is more than most get. These days, he no longer works in law enforcement, well, that's good, and now resides in Charlotte, North Carolina. Moving on. Iowa. On January 1st, 2015, Teat and another former officer, Joshua Judge, arrested Kyle Jacob Weldon on outstanding warrants out of Marion and Monroe counties for theft and probation violation. A small container with residue suspected of being methamphetamine was found on Weldon, but the amount of residue in the container was likely not enough to positively identify the substance, according to the criminal complaints. During the same work shift, Officer Tout arrested another subject after the subject had thrown a container of methamphetamine out of a vehicle. Officer Tout later placed an amount of methamphetamine from the second incident into the container of the subject arrested in the first incident. Tout received 1-year probation and retired from the police force. Can you just tell me, why he would do that? Do you need an arrest that bad? Why do you have to put the methamphetamine in there? A probation violation for theft wasn't enough? It makes no sense. And that was in 2015. This is a little older one, but very interesting. 1975, after the shooting death of Bernard Whitehurst by a Montgomery, Alabama police officer who mistakenly thought Whitehurst was a suspect in the robbery of a neighborhood grocery store, there was a police cover-up that included police officers planting a gun on him from the police evidence room. The coroner relied on police reports that Whitehurst was killed by a bullet fired through the chest. After an investigation by the local newspaper and local attorney David Watkins raised questions about the facts of the case 6 months later, the district attorney James Evans ordered the body to be exhumed and an autopsy to be performed. The results of the autopsy showed that Whitehurst had been shot in the back, which, especially back then, is extremely illegal. Now I think cops can get away with it. They couldn't then. The attempted cover-up led to the resignation of 8 police officers, the city's mayor, James Robinson, and the director of public safety, Ed Wright. No police officer was convicted of a crime. 40 years later, the Montgomery City Council passes a resolution that formally expressed regret for the shooting and the cover-up. Just a tad bit too late. Moving on. My little drapes. Illinois. In 1992, 11-year-old Holly Staker was raped and murdered while babysitting in Waukegan, Illinois. A local man named Juan Rivera was convicted of the murder solely on the basis of a confession, one that he claimed was coerced. No physical evidence linked him to the crime scene, and many details of his confession contradicted known evidence from the crime scene. Now, mind you, this happened in 1992. You'll see why that's important. In DNA testing done in 2004 on semen taken from the crime scene ruled out Rivera as the source. However, The prosecution argued that the semen sample came from the previous consensual sex with another man. Rivera was convicted again. His conviction was overturned by the appellate court, who took the unusual step of barring prosecutors from retrying Rivera, and he was released. After his release, Rivera's attorneys asked the courts to order genetic testing on a piece of evidence the prosecution had tried to use in his trial in 1993. Rivera's shoes had blood on them, which the prosecution argued belonged to Holly. The prosecution withdrew them prior to his first trial when it was discovered that the shoes were not available for sale anywhere in the United States until after the murder. In 2015, Juan's attorney sought further forensic testing on the shoes. DNA analysis indicated the blood indeed belonged to Holly, but also contained another genetic sample, one that matched the semen sample. Rivera's defense team insists that this is not only proof that the blood was planted, but that the real killer's DNA was inadvertently planted as well. The DNA has yet to be matched to an individual, but has been linked to DNA from another home invasion and murder. Obviously, the man convicted of that crime also claims to be wrongfully convicted. But, I mean, here's another case of false confession and DNA testing and setup from the cop. But, like, what kind of cop are you that fucking stupid that you planted stupid evidence? New York City, home sweet home. And I kind of remember this, actually. In the New York State Police Troop C scandal of 1993, Craig D. Harvey, a New York State police trooper, was charged with fabricating evidence. Harvey admitted he and another trooper lifted fingerprints from items the suspect, John Spencer, touched while in Troop C headquarters during booking. He attached the fingerprints to evidence cards and later claimed that he pulled the fingerprints from the scene of the murder. The forged evidence was used during trial, and John Spencer was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. After the truth came out, it was discovered that they had been falsifying evidence in cases for many years. At least 3 officers were convicted. Each case in the department that they had been involved in had to be reinvestigated. Again, I ask why? Why do you need to get a conviction that bad? That you're throwing away people's lives. Florida. Prosecutors are reviewing more than 250 criminal cases involving Jackson County Sheriff's Office Deputy Zachary Wester after video emerged in the past month of him planting drugs in a vehicle during a traffic stop. So far, prosecutors have identified 10 cases that involve misconduct in which incarcerated people's sentences will need to be vacated and 15 pending cases that have been or will be dismissed. And last but not least, Wisconsin. Corruption, lies, multiple evidence plantings, and deceit existed throughout the entire Kenosha criminal justice system. Kenosha's pretty big. It's not tiny. It's a lot bigger than Manitowoc. Those are the words from a Wisconsin Supreme Court investigator looking into claims of misconduct. The state court, and this was in 2016, I believe, the state court assigned attorney Dennis Flynn to investigate claims against former Kenosha County District Attorney Robert Zaff. Zaff retired last year, but the former DA is accused of failing to fully disclose information regarding a police officer planting evidence in a murder case. Failing to disclose another officer's testimony was incomplete, and falsely claiming that he had no personal knowledge of evidence being planted while in office. The accusations stem from a case against Joseph Brantley and Marquise Tibbs. The two I don't know why I have such a dry mouth. The two were convicted in 2014 shooting death of Anthony Edwards. In his report, Flynn claims former Kenosha officer Kyle Bears told a detective he filed evidence on or around October 28, 2014. The report goes on to say that Kenosha officers never placed Bars under arrest or recommended charges be filed. Instead, Bars was allowed to stay on the job until January 2015, when he was placed on administrative leave. That means with pay. The report says, although Zaff became aware of Bauer's confession that same day, he failed to properly notify defense attorneys about the new development until 4 months later, after the trial was already underway. Sound familiar? Flynn's report suggests the integrity of Kenosha's entire justice system, saying, like, how can any citizen have confidence in the outcome of criminal proceedings when the respondent, Zaff, acts like the gatekeeper? Flynn goes on to write, the evidence was in, when all the evidence was in, it became clear that the entire Kenosha law enforcement team acted improperly. We reached out to Kenosha Police Chief Daniel Miskins about the allegations. The chief declined to answer specific questions, but emailed a statement saying the Kenosha Police Department takes allegations of misconduct very seriously. Immediately after reviewing a report prepared by Dennis Flynn, I started exploring multiple avenues of review. Although I believe his report is critically flawed, I am delving into the matter further and will be seeking review at the state or federal level. The report recommends that Zaff's law license be suspended for at least 1 year and that he be banned from acting as the prosecuting attorney in Wisconsin. Zaff is appealing that recommendation, and a Wisconsin Supreme Court judge will make the final decision on the recommendation. Officer Bears resigned from the Kenosha Police Department shortly after he was placed on leave. He was charged with misconduct by the Milwaukee District Attorney's Office. And I think it's really sad that all these people, they're ruining lives, like completely ruining lives, and what are they getting? They're getting like nothing. And it's sad but true, corrupt and incompetent police officers, DAs, and judges have a long history of being protected by their colleagues, police internal affairs, and the government. It needs to stop. And I don't know what kind of deal Zellner made, but Ken Kratz needs to be prosecuted. It's absolutely disgusting what has gone on in this case. And you know, a lot of people think that false convictions and, you know, false confessions are what really needs to change in this system. But to me, this is what needs to really change in this system. We can't keep having officers planning to get a notch under their belt. These are people's lives. And whether they're upstanding citizens or whether they're drug addicts who are stealing to fight a drug habit, that's an addiction. You know, and I don't want to get into a whole case, you know, subject about that, but addiction is not, it's a disease, and drug addiction is not. Addiction comes in many, many, many forms, but you don't, you know, if somebody gets caught with a very, very small amount of the most addictive drug out there, why would you want to throw the book at them? They have a problem. It doesn't make them bad people. You know, if somebody is from the ghetto and they have absolutely no money, yes, I'm not justifying robbing a bank. But, you know, if that's the only way they know, then we need to educate the ghetto. We need to educate them, not just throw them in jail. So the fact that what needs to change in the prison systems isn't so much so there aren't false confessions. It's about getting ahead of why there are false confessions, why police want to throw the book at somebody who might be innocent. And, you know, if someone has a mental illness, it's probably half the reason, I know it's half the reason why people are good in jail and then they come out and they don't have Medicaid. They don't have any way to get their medication that they need. So they, you know, do another crime and go back to jail because at least in jail they feel normal because they get their medication. It's not that they feel normal just because they're institutionalized. They feel normal because they're getting their medication that they need. You know, 50% of criminals are psychopaths. Don't get me wrong, they are, and they belong there. But there's like 50% of them that are there because they need medicine, or there's something mentally ill with them, or they have, you know, a drug addiction or a drug problem. And it's just not fair that you're a cop that you're supposed to trust will do whatever he can to throw you in jail, even if you're innocent. Or they'll set you up just to set you up. It's just wrong, and this shit has to change. So I have rambled long enough, and hopefully this recorded, because I really don't feel like recording this again. If I have to do it again, I'll probably make you guys read it, but it looks like it's working. So I want to thank you guys. And again, I cannot believe how many of you guys have subscribed. Keep subscribing. When I get to 5,000, I'm going to do like a $100 giveaway. So keep subscribing and we'll get to that 5,000 mark and we will have some kind of giveaway. All right. So we'll start small. We'll do like $1,000, not 1,000. I wish I had 1,000 to give you guys, but like $100 gift bag or like a $250 gift basket. I don't know. I'll come up with something. So that's at the 5,000 mark. I'm almost at 3,000 mark. So I got a little while to go, but there's a lot of cases coming. All right. And I hope you guys have a fantastic night. I'm going to close out with another one of my new little logo videos that you're going to start seeing on my videos. And have a wonderful night. And I'll see you guys either tomorrow or Tuesday. Oh, what happened? I missed it. Uh-oh. I missed the end. It disappeared. All right, I don't know what happened to my last video, but oh well. So I hope you guys have a fantastic night. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.